What is up, guys? Welcome back and thank you for joining me in another video. So I'm sorry that it's taken a while to get another video out. I've had a really busy couple of weeks in real life, and even my MSL game has suffered a little bit for that. But I did make about 2 videos last week about the Jack event. However, the audio was a little strange in them. I got some complaints, so I ended up just taking the one that I posted down, and I never uploaded the second one. But before the Jack event ends, I would like to do a Jack video. I'm not going to do the typical videos because I don't think it really makes much sense to do the skills and things like that while we're approaching the end of this particular event. So what I'm going to do instead is move on to the third Jack video that I wanted to talk about, and also I'm going to show off, it's not really show off, but I'm going to show how many Jacks I was able to acquire at the time I'm making this video, which is very close to the end of the actual event. So I have not really seriously farmed Jacks. It's really been, I haven't been in story mode as much as I'd like, partially because of time constraints due to stuff going on in my life, as well as the time I do have to play. I've been primarily doing more golems, and and also the time I spend doing story mode really is primarily just to make the dark stones. Whatever Jacks I find during those events, that's kind of what has populated my box. I will say that when it comes to these 4 stars popping up, the exotic 4 stars popping up during story mode, I actually like that. In addition to the dungeons that are popping up. So I will do any dungeons that I see, any Jack dungeons I see, I am farming those. It's always nice to have a reserve of 4 stars so that you can use those during Heroes Festival to summon the kind of specialty 4-star monsters that are out there. So while it might not be worth it for you to farm the Jacks if you're one of the older experienced players, it is still worth it to farm the Jacks so that you have this reserve of 4 stars if you ever need to do a summon and to try and get some of the specialty Heroes Festival 4-star monsters. It's nice to have those stacked up. But what I wanted to do, so I guess I'll start off with showing how many Jacks I was able to accumulate. So it looks like I've got about 15, I think, in my box, and I think I fed about 3 of them during the last Heroes Festival, so that's about 18. And when it comes to my actual soul stones, so right now I've got 547, so I can easily get that up to 550. So I've got a nice little reserve of Jacks, and I thought about building a second Jack, light Jack, but I don't know if it's actually worth it. We've got so many morale boost monsters, or monsters that will build their SP gauge in some other way. I think right now 1 Jack is enough. Maybe in the past, it would have been, I would have made a second Jack, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. I probably won't. I think I'm just going to feed these monsters. But, for all players, I think it is nice to have 1 light Jack, even outside of just the kind of collectors mentality. And part of that is in for new player, for older players, the Jacks can be used in, say, like a CDC team. If you need an extra powerful monster that's going to build up their SP gauge, and if you think it'll survive, depending, if you build a glass cannon, you're going to have a tougher time getting that Jack to survive by the time it actually can use its morale boost. But if it does survive that long, or if you have Siphon on it, then, you know, Jack has a very powerful 5-star skill. And so for the older players, it might, you know, you can still use the Jack in your CBC team if you wanted to do that. For newer players, that's kind of what I wanted to do the video for. So Light Jack is primarily a farmer, and then Dark Jack is going to be our first farmable adrenaline monster, or passive healer adrenaline monster. So if you haven't been playing since the Light Geminis were released, the Dark Jack is going to be your first opportunity to get a passive healer, which can potentially help you sustain a Golems V10 team. But that's a different video, and I did that one. Unfortunately, the audio was not up to par. But if you do want to see Dark Jack in my very first B10 team, then I do actually have a video for that. The video wasn't made specifically for Jack, but you can definitely see how that team worked, and I can put a link up there somewhere, or it'll be at the end of the video if you want to take a look at that. But what I want to focus on is our Farmer Jack, which is the Light Jack. And so I put my particular Jack on a few ruin gems, and I know that's harder for newer players to get, but I will say with all these Jacks, you have the potential to pick a Jack that has, say, something like triple square or double square triangle, double square diamond, whatever golems you are able to actually farm. You can select the Jack that will fit the gems that you're able to obtain, or the gems that you're able to obtain. So like I've gotten at least one triple square Jack who I have in reserve that I might build, like I said. But you can basically select the gem quality for the Jacks based on the ones that you were able to obtain before you actually start to build them. But so that would mean that if you're able to farm B8, you know, you can just get a triple square Jack, and hopefully you're more likely to get a bunch of ruin gems to help build your Jack to one of his highest damage potential, to his highest damage potential. But what I wanted to do was kind of demonstrate how I used to use Jack in my speed farming team. So this was my idea of a speed farming team without Siphon. So this was after the first Jack event. We did not have a lot of morale boost monsters or monsters that built SP, and it was much harder to start getting into dragons for me at that point. Partially because, well, yeah, I'm not even sure Dragons was out after. I don't even think Dragons was out after they released Jack the first time, although I could be wrong about that. But I did want a speed farming team. So what I ended up doing was I comboed the two monsters that I had with morale boost, which was the Light Jack and the Dark Mona. So I do think after the Dark Mona was released, we did have dragons, and that's when I really started to use my Jack outside of golems. But I comboed my Jack with the Dark Mona, and I ended up building a speed farming team, which was slightly based on RNG, but it was pretty effective for farming Star Sanctuary without Siphon gems. And the times, while not as efficient as our Siphon set monsters, it was still pretty fast, and it was good enough for me. So this is particularly important, I think, for people who are thinking about using their morale boost monsters. There are a lot more out now. This is one way you can build teams that will potentially support speed farming. Now, I will say that this team that was for Star Sanctuary, the damage has to be at a point where your farmers are able to one-shot a monster. And part of that is because you don't really want it makes it a little bit slower if you have say 3 monsters. So if you're on your first wave, you want to ideally take out 2 monsters, and it makes it slower if you end up having 3 monsters left over to split the damage and the RNG random targeting between your monsters on the field. So if you really want to try and one-shot the first stage monsters with your farmers for this to try and remove some level of RNG from these actual runs. So what I like to do is farm the gold stage, and the reason the Dark Mona and the Jacks were particularly helpful at these stages is because you have the split between light and dark monsters. So you've got the Dark Gigabat and you've got the Light Ghost, and then you've also got the Light the Light tie there as well on the gold stage. So as long as there was a say, you know, at least one dark and at least one light on the stage, my Dark Mona would target the you know, the dark bat, and then one of the light monsters, and then my light Jack would target one of the dark monsters. So, and if their damage was high enough that they would be able to one-shot those, generally leaving 2 monsters on the field. Now there's always RNG involved with what monsters show up you know, on the first stage, so there was always a possibility that nothing but light or nothing but dark showed up, and so that made it a little bit more difficult, or that lessened the chances of me being able to one-shot using the elemental advantage of either the dark Jack or the light Jack or the Dark Mona. But yeah, so this technique really can be used with any of your morale boost monsters. You can try it with the light and dark Seira, depending on how you have them built. I don't think it's really fair for me to try that with the ones that I have, because I have them on Siphon, even though my light Seira is not she's got some pretty poor Siphon gems. She's still in Siphon. So this video is really geared toward players who are not able to who are having more difficulty with getting Siphon gems, whether it's because they're not able to do dragons or they're just not dropping for them. So yeah, so so that's the primary strategy. That's the first level of the strategy for doing a speed farming non-siphon set. Is on the first wave, you want to have you want your Siphon monsters to be able to one-shot 2 separate monsters on the field. So the way I've done that with the Dark Mona and the Light Jack is I've used their elemental targeting to try and ensure that they will not only get the extra damage boost, but that they will target an opposite monster, so that only 2 monsters are left on the field when they go into the actual next stage. And so, you know, they'll build up their SP, so they have the chance to build up SP for 2 turns on the first run, and ideally, and then that's where you kind of get into the RNG. So what works the best is if one of your farmer SP boost monsters gets the blue orbs and actually fills up going into the second wave. So for example, if your Jack uses his SP gain and, you know, he's 3/4 full, and then he gets enough blue orbs to go into the second wave, ideally the other farmer did not get any blue orbs, or did not get very many blue orbs, and your Jack will be able to will use her 5-star skill and clear the second wave with her 5-star skill, and then that will generate, and then the monsters attacking there will generate enough blue orbs that your other farmer, so in this case the Dark Mona, will be full. Will be able to use her 5-star skill to clear the third wave, and so that significantly cuts down on the amount of time that it might take you to farm the actual stages. And that's really the premise of the Siphon set. It's that your monster gains enough blue orbs to get a full gauge, and then because of the way Siphon works, once their gauge is full, more than likely, once they use their 5-star AoE, they will have another full gauge on the next run just to spam their AoE attacks. So in this case, because we don't have Siphon on a Siphon set on these monsters, they will not be able to fill their gauge up after they use their 5-star skill. They won't fill it immediately like the Siphon monsters will. But if you have another monster who has a full gauge, they will take the place of that fill and will one-shot the next wave in the same way that your Siphon built monsters would have if you actually had the Siphon gym set. So this is the method that I used. Those are the requirements for the method. Your monsters need to be strong enough to basically one-shot all of the waves. So when they get their 5-star skill off, that's key as well, is them being able to one-shot all the waves. And that's not very difficult when you're actually using the elemental advantage on the stage, and to kind of boost the elemental advantage and to do some cleanup. What you can also do is you can use monsters, the other two monsters that fill those farmer slots. You can either do another set of not Siphon, but morale boost monsters, and or you can use monsters that share the same element as your SP gain monsters. So like in this run, I'm supporting the light dark matchups with a dark Sea Star and a light Vic, and that's to do some cleanup on any monsters that the Jack or the Mona might have fallen short on. If say for example they didn't have the elemental advantage against that monster and they couldn't get off enough damage to clear those waves, then you'd have monsters who will automatically target, or have the chance of potentially automatically targeting the monsters that would need the cleanup. But given the 5-star skills of the Dark Jack, she does a massive amount of damage, and I think she can fairly easily clear these waves, even without the help of a light dark. And the other substitute I did was I used a morale boost monster that does the 10%, that will add 10% extra SP onto every monster as long as once they attack, and that's the Dark Sparket. So that helped to build their SP gauge. That's another tactic you can use to help speed up and guarantee the SP gauge gain. And so the other thing that I did with the combination of the Jack and the Mona, I think I kind of tried to use the crit rate dependence kind of to my advantage. First of all, it was harder for me to get crit rate at the time, but also having one have slightly higher crit rate than the other would allow me to stagger the SP gain a little bit more than not having the crit rate dependence when it's guaranteed. But yeah, so that's one thing to think about, guys. Like I said, there are a lot more SP boost monsters now that I haven't built, like the Fire Rat Eye. I mean, he might work. I don't know, I've never built one, but it's something to think about. This was the technique that I used for a good period of time to farm Star Sanctuary before we got all of these new updates with the Star Stones and even the Dark Sparket. I don't have the Light Succubus who does the same thing, but you know, if you want that, if you have that monster, then she can also help. She can take the place of the Dark Sparket. And you know, even though I used like the Dark Sea Star and the Light Vic at some point, those are not really necessary. We've had plenty of powerful light dark monsters. Well, mostly dark, I guess, dark monsters that can take the place of the Dark Sea Star in this case. So that not in every case, but in this particular case, when it comes to farming Star Sanctuary, it's pretty easy to substitute, unless you need that crit rate boost. Then it becomes a little bit more difficult. But yeah, guys, so that's what I really want to talk about today. I think that, you know, I actually think that we've had quite a few nice events. Some of them are gold sinks or Astro Gem sinks, but I think I like some of the changes that that 433 has introduced into the game. But with the new monsters, it does make it harder for older players to talk about, because a lot of them we don't really need. So we do actually have the Light Birdie, who is a 20% morale boost. And I always thought about this because, like I said, I tried to stagger the crit rate, so that one of the Mona or the Jack had slightly lower crit rate than the other, so that ideally they would not have their SP gauge full on the same second run, or the same third run, more often than not. Or I tried to stagger that. And I always played around with the idea, well, maybe if I had a 20% booster instead of the other 30% booster, that would actually help. But at the time, the only 20% booster I think that was around was the Water Mona, and I hadn't built her, and I wasn't sure I wanted to build her at the time, because at that time B8 was actually a light dungeon, it wasn't the fire, so I had no reason to really build her at the time. But I always wondered if that would work. So we do have more monsters, and you can kind of play around with the moral boost rate and see how well that integrates into this strategy if you've actually built monsters with different amounts of morale boost. But the caveat where they do need to be able to one-shot could make this a little bit more difficult depending on the actual build you have on your monster. But yeah, so I'm going to stop talking, guys. Hopefully I've gotten my point across. If you have questions about that, you can definitely leave me a comment, and I can try and answer it. So I have provided a video here which shows kind of how the strategy ends up when your RNG is perfect. And basically, you know, the way RNG works is it's basically luck. So there are never any guarantees in games like this. All you can do is try and generally limit RNG where you can, and you know, hope for the best. So this is one way that you can potentially speed up a portion of your runs. It won't be 100% of the time, but in the absence of Siphon, you know, you have this opportunity now to build more monsters that will SP gain faster than the regular monster. So it's just something to think about. So yeah, guys, if you like this video, definitely leave me a like, subscribe to my channel, and leave me a comment. And hopefully I will be back sooner than later with the next video. And I really appreciate you guys, and I'll talk to you later.